And I'm also thank you for the invitation to this lecture. So my lecture is very different from the other speaker. I'm talking about the next big topic, digitalization. My work comes actually from diverse research projects on globalization of popular dances, for example, tango, salsa, hip hop, and the relocalization of these dances, but also the globalization of stage dance, like I worked a lot with Pina Bausch, as you heard, with the Pina Bausch company, and the global perception, for example, of these company in the whole world. So, and when the pandemic started, I began to work on the digitalization because I understood that cultural globalization is very, very much connected to the digitalization of dance. And I will show you some material which I collected just to give you an impression, because I think most of you are not dance scholars. And so the first of all, there was a first video which came up at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was this one. So it's now from the National Opera in Paris. So on. And there are a lot of videos like this nowadays, but it was the first one, and it was a big motivation for the ballet companies all over the world. And then people started, for example, to teach. Well, it's not my computer, so I don't know. Started to teach. This was the other one. Here is also a video. It's actually a digital lesson from the Volkwang University. You can see here actually that the students are on Zoom and watching their professor teaching dance. Here you have digital teaching in the master program I'm conducting at the Hamburg University Performance Study. It's a practical class actually. And also we have a lot of well-known companies who began to give dance workshops, digital dance workshops, or here you have an example for hybrid rehearsals, so that the people all over the world which were at home, we couldn't go out, that the whole company tried to work together with these in these hybrid forms. Or you have these new forms of streaming, actually not streaming, streaming. And what is new is here that you always have these comments on the side. You don't have that when you are in in the opera, for example. And of course, all the Zoom meetings, we all also know discussions about the future of dance and so on. So this is actually my material, and for the project I would like to do here in this year. But today I would like to give you an insight which methodology I will use for that, and that's a praxeological approach. I have 6 points which I want to run through, the first one is what are the central features of a praxeological methodology, because it's on methodologies. And dance studies, actually, as you probably know, is a very young discipline. It actually started in the 80s, and I belong to the first generation, actually, of dance scholars internationally. Dance studies is currently still at the age where its conceptual tools, theoretical approaches, and methodologies primarily come from neighboring disciplines like theater studies and others. I myself represent a social scientific, one could also say a cultural sociological approach to dance research. Therefore, I've always tried to transfer methodological procedures that are established and elaborated in social research to dance research, and to adapt them to the research object of dance. And one of my favorite methodologies is praxeology. Praxeology itself is well established in sociology as a theory and a qualitative research method. The starting point was the research of sociologists such as Pierre Bourdieu or Theodor Wyszyński, as well as the ethnomethodologist Harold Garfinkel. In the meantime, the praxeological approach has differentiated itself in various directions, and this actually no lecture. A praxeological approach to dance research emerges from methodological considerations. How can dance be read, written, examined, interpreted, or analyzed? This question is not easy to answer, as dance is described as a phenomenon that is fluid or ephemeral. In dance research, dance is present and absent at the same time. It is absent because the dance is always already in the past and only memorable as a trace. In dance studies, dance is usually regarded as unfixable, it's non-categorizable. Methodological considerations of dance analysis are therefore always linked to the epistemological problem of analyzing a dynamic form, in other words, capturing the so-called fleeting phenomenon. But the dance is also always present as a translated phenomenon. Dance research works with documents that are based on medial translation. The performance of dance has to be transferred into other media, into film, video, text notation, and others. And the dancing body is especially present in a praxeological approach, because praxeology concentrates on the anchoring of ideas, values, norms, signs, and symbols within bodies, but also within other materialities like things and artifacts such as spaces, materials, props, stage designs, costumes, documents, and written and visual records. In a praxeological approach, the focus lies not on the question of what the dance means, but rather on the question of how values, ideas, norms, etc. are performed. It attempts to locate them in practices, in their situatedness. The how shifts the scholarly attention from the meaning to the action. It would be short-sighted and misguided to view the necessary medial translation steps of dance practice to dance research as one-to-one transmissions. This touches on the general problem of translation theory and actually also of the general problem of globalization theory, the relationship between identity and difference. What usually serves as a research material is not the dance, the event, the performance situation, but rather something that has already been translated, namely the dance stored in technical media such as video or DVD, or semiotic media like language, written, notation, scripts, or signs. The transfer of dance into a research object via different media creates dance anew, and at the same time as something other, as discursive knowledge. In contrast to some arguments, these medial translations should not be regarded as a loss of a non-transferable remainder. While there is indeed a kind of aesthetic surplus, something that cannot be translated, but still, translations of dance into technical media and then into scripts and written documents are productive, for they are new knowledge. Only in and through these media translation, it is possible to transfer the dance from what Aleida and Jan Astman called the communicative memory into the cultural memory of dance. A praxeological methodology is thus based on two suppositions. On the one hand, it assumes that describing and interpreting dance does not depict the dance, but has to do with the generation of something other. Medial translation produces a difference, which in turn depends on the respective medium and its specific mediality, die Darstellbarkeit in Deutsch. Thus, the translation of a dance into a written notation or script generates something different from a video recording, and thus follows due analytical perspective on the translated. My second point, material and methods. What material do we use to analyze a dance performance? If a dance performance is considered not only as a finished, unchangeable product, but as an eventful, unique, and unrepeatable performance situation, which depends from the social and cultural context. In other words, as something that is situationally different in each performance and that is differently perceived by a different audience and reviewed by critiques, the question of empirical material then becomes particularly relevant. What material can be translated with which methodological approach, and how is this done? How is the reading of the material predetermined by the corresponding methodology? In general, dance uses 4 groups of material. Notation and documents on paper, such as written documents, material of written preparation and conception of choreographies, formalized movement scripts, such as Laban notation, kinetography, and notation variants like Banner's notation, individually designed materials such as sketchbooks, graphic illustration, annotated director's books, stage manners lists, stage design drawings, etc. Second, we use documentation software such as digital technology programs, like for example, the Feldpartitur in German, Fieldscroll. Which I especially use for analyzing. And films and digital artifacts such as video annotation, digital dance, blogs, websites, or special archive or artistic collective, interactive forms of presentation, streaming, online performances, digital rehearsal visits, digital trainings, etc. And also for self-generating materials through videos and ethnographic procedures. To analyze the different types of analog and digital materials, we need a mixed method approach, where the content, discourse, image, or video analysis, ethnographic or historiographic procedures, there is a pool of elaborate methods from the humanities, cultural studies, social science, and historiography. However, these methods have to be transferred to their subject dance, and, for example, new, more subtle categories have to be found that can capture the dance in a differentiated way. In general, The praxeological approach uses mixed methods for analyzing a dance performance. It's video analysis, the movement analysis, stage analysis, and rehearsal and audience perception with the analysis of social situation. What role does digitalization play in research, especially in praxeological dance research? And this is my third point, digitalization. Digitalization is not new in the world of research methods. Rather, the digital has long been interwoven with not only the world of qualitative research and not just in dance. The digitalization of research is closely linked to the history of media technology. Since the 1970s, the practice of scientific research, the production, storage, ordering, processing, and presentation has been digitally transformed. One can say methodological practices, also in dance research, are nowadays characterized by a culture of digitality. How Felix Stalder in his book in German, Kultur der Digitalität, quotes it. This culture of digitality appears in research subject paths and possibilities, in access to documents, in methods like data processing via special software, in ways and forms of collaboration via platforms like Slack, for example, Confluence or Trello, in the research distribution, and in the use of research databases for archiving and secondary usage. The praxeological approach to dance research is ambitious. It is fundamentally based on face-to-face communication, but is also closely linked to a digital research culture. In this respect, praxeological dance research is characterized by a general media dependency of its practices. Today's smart technology illustrates what was already given by media translation of research material into written artifacts. Non-human actors, notations, for example, kind of notation also have their own agency, but unlike analog translation media, digital software creates meaning via algorithm. Fourth, methodology and as theory. Observing, documenting, researching, interviewing, taking notes, recording with language, pen, camera, or video, transcribing, modeling, interpreting, analyzing, discarding, and evaluating, grouping and arranging, theorizing, in writing, reflecting upon, presenting, discussing, publishing, translating into product, and implementing in fields of knowledge. These are just a few of practices of knowledge production that are characteristic not only for praxeological dance research, but also for the practices of dance production as well. Despite these similarities, scientific and dance practice are two different fields of knowledge production. They are characterized by different practical logics and different temporalities. Recognizing these different logics of dance and scientific practice, relating them to one another, methodologically implementing and theoretically reflecting upon, form the basis of a praxeological methodology. A praxeological approach is therefore a critical and analytical project that provokes a redefinition of what dance theory is meant to be. Conducted as empirical research, it demands a permanent relativization of theory. From this point of view, the development of theory cannot remain self-referential, but must be empirically embedded, refer to this material, and reveal the translation steps. Thus, the point of departure of practice theory is theory's attachment to empirism, to the material, as well as the material's attachment to theory. A praxeological perspective thus sacrifices the idea of what theory generally stands for, namely pure thought or a model, a depiction of reality. But what it gains is an eye for diversity, for wealth, and for what Pierre Bourdieu calls the silent language with which dance practices themselves create an object of study that dance scholars explore. Praxeology thus conceptually embodies a pioneering idea, namely undermining the dualism of theory and practice, scholarship and art that is so characteristic of modernity, thus circumventing politics of inclusion and exclusion and the power relations between the artistic and the scientific fields with and through praxeological movement. The scholar as translator. In a praxeological approach, researchers are called on to expose the historicity and culturality of their own point of view and to reveal their own interpretive positions. Not only has critical theory in the tradition of the Frankfurt School considered self-reflection to be a fundamental category of critical thinking since the early 1930s, but it has also been established a fundamental principle of qualitative research in the sense of a reflexive methodology, which is expanded in gender, post-colonial and race studies to demand for reflection on the social position of the speaker. The production of knowledge depends on this kind of self-reflection, which cannot in turn be separated from constellations of power. Thus, attention must also be paid to the researchers themselves, to their proximity and distance to the field of research, their effectiveness, their empathy and corporeality, in short, to their bodies, as how Robert Bogoza calls it, Erkenntnissubjekte, subjects of cognition. Researchers are themselves part of these practices. Due to their embeddedness within the research process, they are called upon to address and reflect on the relationship of their practices to the practices they are examining. I come to my conclusion. As I wanted to show today, dance as a movement, event, as temporal form has always been absent from research and at the same time present as a medial translation. Researchers are confronted with a hybrid set of analog and digital media practices in dance and scientific research that reveal similarities, but which differ in the ways that they are carried out. On the one hand, with the research method used both in scientific and dance work to generate knowledge and use its results in various ways. On the other hand, dance research is using distinct modes of reflecting upon and processing their own approach to materials, which in turn find their own specific forms of translation. Thereby, dance research is permanently producing new artifacts and knowledge that find their way into cultural memory. With digitalization, the established qualitative methods have changed the way to generate sources, to analyze, and to present results. On the one hand, these create new research opportunities. But on the other hand, digital research tools do not take over the necessary intellectual processes and interpretation. We researchers are responsible for that. And that is also a research ethics aspect. Or is this individual responsibility no longer the case in the digital present or future? Will the intellectual performance of the researcher be absent in the future? Thank you very much.